today. My name's Dean Donaldson. If you haven't got your headphones on, you're probably not going to need them, but I'd suggest putting them on anyway. So I look after the innovation at MediaMind, and today I want to talk to you about engagement everywhere, what we mean by engaging with consumers in this new landscape. I kind of understand that we're in a silent world, so I was kind of thinking about starting off in this whole thing and almost going back in time, and I felt the need to sort of come over here and do the whole, for the people at the back who haven't got the headphones. But it's interesting, when you kind of look at this film this year that's taken the Hollywood by storm, we're kind of reminded at how far media has gone over the last few years. I mean, especially in the realm of television. Television's had a history of innovation, moving from that silence, the black and white, into color, and into all the smart products that television's about to become as we start to move forward. It just means that sort of television has been doing this for the last 70 years, and the online perspective, we've been doing it for the last 15. We accept the speed of change is growing astronomically. The next 5 years will represent what we've learned over the next 10 years in the industry. But that's not to undo the massive advancements that television has been through and is going to go through, because this is hugely important. One of the big things that caught the press this last month has been this whole thing about the iPad. I don't know whether you caught it on the Twitter sphere, but somebody had actually put out and suggested this was a hidden marketing message from Apple's campaign. And what they were suggesting here is that if you look at the introduction of the iPad, you see that something like PC shipments and web browsing has suddenly started to decline as people have moved over to the iPad. Well, actually, there's an element of truth in there. 18 months ago, Wired put out a report that for the first time, web browsing had started to decline as we were moving people into apps. About 6 months ago, a similar report came out and said that PC sales had started to decline as people were taking their smart devices with them. And we're seeing this massive shift of this whole idea of what do we mean by the word online. Internet access is growing astronomically. There are now more network devices than people on the planet. And that's kind of where we've got to. And even from a technology company, a company that's responsible for putting advertising out on the internet, we're already seeing that each quarter goes by, the number of advertising that's shifting into mobile devices is doubling. In some cases, in some campaigns, we're seeing up to 40% of those ads trafficked are being picked up on a mobile device. Now, these are not bought as mobile campaigns or trafficked as mobile campaigns, and yet that shift of consumers is happening, and we as an industry are slow to take this up. Adobe doesn't even have a HTML5 product for the rest of us to even use, but the consumers are moving on at such an alarming rate.
What are you afraid of?
And then we start thinking about television, this whole realm of mobile and television. It's going to be a $250 million industry over the next few years. That's the new segment of an industry for mobile TV. So it kind of questions what we actually mean by television. You see, television really is a geography. It's a place, it's a function. It's no longer that box that sits there in the corner of the room. And with that means that we have to radically rethink what this technology is going to be doing. You see, we kind of have this false notion that television is this kind of lean-back experience. Rubbish. It hasn't been leaned back for the last 30 to 40 years. You see, if you actually think about that television set, the way you're engaging with it, you've been continually interacting with it. Each wave of technology, even the next wave of technology, will see you increasingly interacting with that big screen. Yes, when you find the content, you sit back and relax. But where you sit back and watch video content on there or there, it's still lean back and a lean forward experience, depending on what function you're doing at that particular time. And that crossover opens up opportunities for what do we mean by interactive television moving forwards. We all have this kind of romantic notion that whatever invention that we can do, we pin on Apple. And yes, we've got the rumor mill going again with this next wave of televisions. The reality being is you change your CV set every 7 to 10 years. You change your mobile every 1 to 2. So to get mass consumer adoption of some kind of intelligent television is still quite a long way off for us to fully utilize. So it means we have to start looking at what the reality of consumers are doing, and that is all that content is shifting onto a box in the corner of your room. It's the way we started cataloging music 10 years ago, photography 5 years ago. It's very much now about film and television content, video content. And as soon as we've understood this digital transition, it starts lifting itself up into the cloud. and then from there starts pumping itself down onto whatever screen that we choose to engage with this video content in. Even Blu-ray players. You stick a disc in a Blu-ray player now, and it's coming up with this, do you want to actually turn this existing DVD into a cloud version and buy a digital copy? And so what we're seeing is this transition of moving people into this cloud-based digital media. They reckon that, you're going to see the electronic sell-through, buying stuff on Amazon and iTunes, doubling over the next couple of years. But it will not make up for the deficit in home entertainment sales that we're seeing with the decline of discs. So that whole wave of home entertainment is now under threat because of what's actually happening in terms of the industry. It means that we have to look at those over-the-top boxes, those things that you connect to your television, whether it's your Xbox, your satellite cable box, or increasingly those wireless devices that are interacting with them. But what we do know is that we have to look at how we then, what is this next wave of consumer engagement from an advertising perspective, when we know that advertising is going to be the only answer to make up for the shortfall of physical media sale. When we start thinking advertising, you kind of sort of look at where you've got to. It's purpose-shot video and ads that talk to each other. And so you've got this realm of how advertising on a browser has started to connect with each other to take better stories forward. But we're now moving into a situation where those connected boxes are becoming little wireless boxes that you carry around in between homes. And with it, you've reinvented the remote control. With it, you've actually turned around and you've got this whole idea of the power of the Xbox has shifted into your hand, that I can walk into somebody else's house and flick content onto their screen. And so this connected devices is the next wave of this connected advertising. Already we're starting to see campaigns happening. This is one that we ran in Australia. You can literally log in via a password. You can sit there and control your own laptop screen with this new remote control, or you can sit there and play other people in an actual public space, such as an out-of-home environment. So what we're seeing here, this is for Yellow Pages, is how to actually use a mobile in a device the way it was supposed to use, with sensors, cameras, GPS functions, not just a banner in a browser. And it's rethinking what does mobile do for us as we start to move out of here. You see, we're on this evolutionary path. You see, no longer is it just about content and ads, it's about apps. 90% of what you've done online for the last 15 years has been in an app. You've called it Outlook, you've called it Skype, Napster, FTP. Less than 10% of what we've done online is actually in a web browser, and yet our entire industry is made up of that very function. But we're seeing a radical shift, and with it becomes better advertising and more engaging creative. We're moving into a world that is going to be surrounded by apps. Your magazines are moving to apps, your newspapers are moving to apps. And we're now into a situation where your television stations will be becoming apps. And so this next wave is going to facilitate a whole generation of what does consumer engagement and advertising really mean. If you look at the figures, take someone like Best Buy, who's one of the industry sources, they suggested that last year 30% of televisions sold were connected to the internet. They reckon that to be up to 90% by 2015. It means this realm of online and television is now fully getting merged together. And so when we start looking at those kind of connected TVs, I said, yes, people are picking up speed. They want this new technology. 21% of us bought a new TV in the last year. With that, it now means that 38% of homes are now connected, either direct on the television or through that Blu-ray, Xbox, whatever you've got stuck to it. It's why the industry has talked about this whole idea of cord cutting. They're saying that people don't want to pay for their $75 for a bunch of channels I have no interest in watching. I'm going to go and look for the content I want where I can find it. They've talked about this idea of a digital D-Day, that we're going to all shift away from television and we're all going to move to Netflix and we're all going to do it. Hogwash. It won't happen. Not to the extremities that we've seen it happening in the music industry. And I want to talk you through why in a second. But the reality being is, from a consumer perspective, and it's the same figures both sides of the Atlantic, we spend about 5 hours a day with that television set on. It means by the time you're 65, you'll have spent 14 years with that television set switched on. It also means that as we look at the young people, yes, their habits are changing. They are watching the same television set, but they're using other devices to consume the content. So maybe they will start to shave some of their content away. Maybe younger next generation won't want to pay for content, but we're not seeing this radical D-Day that has been hyped in the press. In fact, the truth remains case. As soon as you put technology into a home, television viewing goes up, not down. And so whether it's a cable and satellite box, whether it's the new iPad or whatever else, and you can take it into the bathroom as the new portable television, whatever happens, TV viewing is on the increase. You can pause it, watch it when you want, record it, however you want to do it. Technology drives the viewing habits because we love to be entertained with content. And so when we start looking at it, it just means that the consumer habits are changing. So only about 54% of us are currently watching live television. We're watching it on those digital video recorders or online. And what are the reasons we're doing it? Most people are great. People at ABC are saying most of it we need to watch within 3 days to keep in sync. I need to know about the match, the news, the reality television show. Drama content, different ball game. Other television programming, we need to watch it near enough live. And so the drive to online is about convenience, not cost. And so this is a massive important factor as we start understanding what's going on in the television industry, especially when 10% are watching online video weekly, and then we're seeing a simultaneous 9% cutting their subscription. And so the industry of television is changing, and we can see that. But I want to take you back. I started off by talking about a shift that was happening from a PC to a mobile device. And it's happening in one of two different directions. You see, you can go through the mobile operators and serve the content out to that screen, or, as we're starting to see, a number of direct advertising is shifting over in content just over Wi-Fi. So it's, the beauty of this is the fact of down here, it's expensive, it's complex to work with that ecosystem, but the value they offer is this flexibility of always-on connectivity. The reality being is if I want to get towards this true, engaging, rich media, creative experience, whether it's content or advertising, this is still too slow down here. And more so, we have an archaic way of thinking which resembles the AOL and CompuServe, where I had to pay for data. Now, I thought advertising was supposed to give me something for free in exchange. I don't want to pay for your advertising. So this model that CompuServe and AOL had to shake through is what the mobile industry is going to go through. But what we do know is that next wave of 4G takes us from the 2 MIPS under 100 MIPS. Now, what does that mean? In practical terms, it means you can download a HD movie in under 5 minutes. That's fast. In fact, it's probably faster than most of your broadband connections today. You see, the whole shift to 4G is about video. It's not about Facebook or Twitter or all those things. It's about getting prepared and changing the infrastructure for this next wave of the video explosion that's going to start happening before us. And when you start looking at television, it's exactly the same thing that's happening. So we can go through those broadcast managed networks and serve content out, or we can serve direct through web television. That's this new shift that we're starting to see. At the bottom, they're arguing is closed, it's controlled, it's proprietary. But what they do sit on is premium content. If you want to watch the Formula One, you want to watch all the sports, you've got to pay for it on a subscription. You can't get it anywhere else, at least not at the moment. And so what's happening is they're saying, well, fine. People like Google are now throwing the gauntlet down and saying, we're putting money on the table, go and create original content and we'll pay you for it. We're not going to pay those deals, we're going to create our own content. And that's exactly what the TV industry went through 20 years ago when it shifted to cable and satellite. So it's already been there before. The pressure from the consumers is unbundle everything. We don't want to sit there and pay for these ridiculous charges for this content we don't want to do. So the TV industry has got to say, do we follow the music industry and you buy a single rather than an album, buy a show rather than an actual channel, or do we find a different model for going forward? And so what they've come up with is this idea of television everywhere. If it's about convenience and not about cost, then all we'll do is extend your subscription service from a piece of hardware to a piece of software, and now if you have the app and you subscribe to your app, you can watch television everywhere. The needs to go up to the web version is actually becoming less because you're still controlled within that content environment. So the TV industry is trying to prevent the Napster thing happening that we've seen to date in the music industry. The other thing is these guys are paying money up front. Television throw a lot of money, these aggregators, to get that content done. And so it means that the people at the top, the Googles, the Apples, are going to have to exceed those existing deals if they want that content. These guys are coming back and saying we have a solid user base. You can't even get on the internet without us because if you buy your TV subscription, we'll give you the internet as part of your package. So they're saying that if you're going to sit there and go the other routes, we're going to start locking down the actual internet. And so we're starting to see people like BBC iPlayer saying, we're coming off YouTube unless you're going to pay us up front. We've seen Disney pull things like Toy Story 3 off Netflix because they've turned around and said, we're not going to disrupt this model here where we've got a solid user base and you're giving me a cost per engagement model up there. So people like Apple, as they've done with mobile and they will with the television, as will the other providers, turn around and say every screen will have an operating system, and if you want it to display on there, we're going to lock it down, you're going to pay us a percentage of that. And so they're trying to shake up this industry in terms of who owns what and what's going on. And then just to make matters worse, if you caught the press over the last 2 weeks, Intel have said, fine, we'll lock down the chips. And so they want to turn around and start locking down the graphics processor chips and saying, because if you're going to serve out media and video, you need our chips, and we want a bite of the cherry as well. So everything is really shaking up right now in terms of what this industry is going to turn into as we look at web and television moving towards the same goal of being delivered over the internet. It means those old ways of looking at media have to change. The creators are trying to get direct to the consumers. The people on the consumers are trying to become aggregators like Sharp's operating system on its television and all those sorts of things. The aggregators are trying to sort of go both content and distribution, and actually the distributors are trying to lock down the entire system. And that's what's happening. They turned around and said, fine, we'll control the whole thing. And then what happens is this whole industry gets very mixed up. And you're no longer sure who's doing what. And then we have a wave of new content creators from Amazon, Google, Microsoft, or new aggregators in the terms of the proposed Apple television. And suddenly this online television split is becoming incredibly blurred. From a money perspective, what we're seeing is that rich media dollars are starting to reach a peak, and it's splitting in two directions. We're seeing the dynamic creative in terms of the static direct response ads, but this video is now being pulled out into a natural environment in terms of in-stream. And that video content is set to explode to what they say is $7.7 billion. This is far superior to any of the online media that we've seen to date in terms of the explosion of this content. But equally, when you start looking at it from a wider perspective, you start looking where we were to where we'll go, and what you're able to see here is two things happening. Where online was is where mobile will become. Where TV was is where online will become. And so you're seeing this narrowing gap of television and online ever starting to happen as video starts to make its way through. So we have to look at the inventory, and we're sitting there saying, okay, there's the upfronts, there's the private marketplace, and then right down the bottom we've got the karaoke cats on YouTube. And the actual, what we're saying is the content in terms of where the advertising, where the subscription's going to be, is still very much in that premium, high-quality content, and it just flows through to the exchange-based system where we'll start to see the rise of DSPs for television as we move forward. But it's all about the long tail, and everybody's trying to move the content up to have better premium content because they know that's where the bigger dollars are moving forward. And so the revenue splits as you start to look forward are still very much going to be in favor of television because they've managed to control a way of working with this consumer shift to take advertising and to take the monetization of creating the content, building and distributing it, as well as monetizing it with advertising moving forward. So we'll see some pressure from the other areas, but we'll also see some of those main operators still control the lion's share. So as we see this shift from on-air to online, it means that we have to sit there and look at it from an advertising perspective. We know that very few advertisers have a strategy for what is happening in this connected television space. We know that they're hugely interested. They're very excited about the potential of data, of interactivity, of measurements, of targeted media. There's a lot of discussion and talk, and finally the light bulbs are going on for everybody, and they want to understand it. And yet the reality is, most television today, that video online, is still actually bought by the TV guys. It's just part of a bundle. You buy your TV program and we'll give you the online stuff as well. So this isn't being driven by digital, it's being driven by television people looking for new ways to actually monetize and get their content out. So it means that we have to start rethinking the consumer. You see, it doesn't matter what you're doing. The biggest thing we talk about on social media is television content, whether you're talking about the football, the news, what's going on. And so we're seeing these connected devices. We're no longer huddled around one set talking about stuff, we're in multiple homes talking about it. But this connected device world gives me new realms of what the live TV show's doing with the Twitter feeds and Facebook, but it's giving me this connected screen. And that connected screen is important because 42% of us are now looking at a companion device whilst engaged in front of that television set. What are we doing? Well, most of us are still checking email. A huge percentage are starting to shift and look at the Facebooks and have those conversations. But the biggest thing I'm interested in is here, because these are big numbers on their own compared to anything we've ever seen in terms of online. And so what happens is that you start to realize that 25% of consumers go online after seeing a television experience. They start looking for the content, looking for the information. It's display and search in the new world of a connected screen. And that's only going to see to grow as we find new technologies. And that starts coming in and starts looking in things like automatic content recognition, knowing if you're in front of that television set or not. And if you are and you're doing something, can we make the experience start to be seamless? And we've started to see it's not just phone up and join in the game or SMS the game, it's physically play the game whilst you're looking at the content. And so this last year we've seen the Super Bowl, the biggest television advertising spend on the planet, not just sit there and get the hype on Madonna, it was all about Shazamable ads. It was you saw a television ad and you were able to sit there and point your phone and create some kind of like QR audio click-through that kind of drove you through to an experience on a mobile. Wonderful, we suddenly have got clickable ads for TV. Until you start realizing that it's actually the reality is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you get the picture? It's not quick enough to work with television. But it's a great idea if all we looked at was clickable ads. But I don't want to look at clickable ads. I've come from a rich media and engaging background. I want to look, say, how do I continue storytelling? And we do that by using 2 technologies. Acoustic fingerprinting, that hidden data that you never see as a consumer, but all the tech guys see it because it tells them about the information. It's the metadata on the top of your web pages that tell the search engine what it's all about. That is starting to put into television. And the reason being is that we can start to know whether that television show or advert was aired. We start to lock down piracy. We start to understand this shift, and then we start feeding that data out to Nielsen that they're able to sit there and work out not just from the small boxes, but potentially any connected box as to whether they're watching television. It opens up new opportunities for measurement. But the way you do this isn't just a visual, it turns into high frequency sounds that apparently you can't hear, but only dogs can. So, but this is kind of where it's actually happening now. This whole high screams are happening at levels that we can't hear. That's one side. The other side is a little bit more interesting. It's what's called watermarking. Now, this is a continuous stream of information that's overlaid over the TV content. It gives me cue points in video that I can trigger multiple events as you're watching that video content through. And so the TV, the companion device, can continually change based on what you're watching. It means that we start taking existing television content and giving it metadata. So in this particular case, you put in keywords against television, and now when you're watching your television set and you have a companion device there, lo and behold, what advert is served? Notice in this new world, there is no television advertising. if you're skipping the ads anyway, let's find a way of getting them back. Now, that's not to say the way the industry will go. We have to find ways of over-encouraging people to start interacting with creative. But what we're seeing is the rise of product placement, dynamic product placement, that will trigger new advertising opportunities for creativity. We've started to see it already in these kind of examples here, where it's reinventing rich media. So here it's like you take TV advertising and rechange television advertising by pulling out my X-ray specs. And so you pull out your X-ray specs and you have this different experience. And it's brilliant because suddenly it's picture in picture. It's targeted. You ladies, you have a completely different experience to what the guys see. Children see something completely different again. Suddenly I've got targeted media in a mass audience. And from us, it's just a rich media ad, but rather than rolling over a banner, I roll over a banner, which is a television set. So it's taking the same technology thinking and reapplying it in a modern context. We're already seeing this with Weidman and Kennedy, with the Honda Jazz advert, where you're able to sit down and continually interact with content, where you're able to hear, not only download the app, but then use almost like a Nintendo Wii device and grab characters. And those cue points linked in with the motion sensors unlocked hidden content, and the more content, the more rewards. So we've started to see this radical rethink in what does engaged interactive media mean before we change the television set itself, using new technology. So about last year, Channel 4 came to us and they said, okay, we've got a game show, £1 Million Drop. You familiar with this TV show? So what they wanted to do is for the client is, whilst you were watching the television show, they had this online game that you could play along with at the same time. And so they said, well, when it turns to the ad break, can we serve advertising simultaneously into the online game? And the answer was, yes, we can. And so what we were able to do was at the moment, at the very split second that TV ad came on, you didn't have to listen to it, because the technology in the TV studio that we've got in literally pumped out to the online servers and had that online ad ready to rock and roll and jump across that page at exactly the split second. We cut out the latency issues. And what we were able to do is when we start looking at the data, there were 115,000 people playing that online game. They watched it for the full 3 minutes, 17%. That's more data we've ever had about people who watch TV ads, just by knowing those who are on the companion device. And also they drove a click-through. Not that I would recommend clicks as being the way forward for TV, but we're starting to see a new realm forward in terms of doing it. But now we're at another stage. You're watching television content. Let's be honest, you're not going to have a laptop open. You're going to have one of these open.
Under maximum security to our protected set, where the entire $1 million will be handed over to one couple. Their challenge? Hang on to it.
So the reality is, while you're sitting there watching this television show, this money drop, and you're getting engaged with this television program, you're going to be sitting and playing along at home with some kind of companion device. And so as the questions are sort of coming up on the monitor, the TV was actually synced in with the actual device. And as those questions come up,
on a standard US touch-tone telephone,
it starts to appear on my iPad. I don't know if you can all see it from here. I apologize, I've only got one screen to work with. But we're starting to see this realm of how connected content, where you can choose to get involved and play with a game. And then something interesting happens. It turns to the advertising break. And in that middle of that advertising break here, as those TV ads are sort of coming on, you're starting to see advertising at the bottom appear and turn into a homepage takeover experience on the mobile device. So you're starting to see this thing. I can sit here and play the video. I can choose to interact with it and watch the full screen video if I want and play around with the game. And then suddenly I'm able to have this continued story of mirroring what's on that screen onto this device here. But it's not just about that. I then want to go into the next creative, and as that suddenly starts to change, it starts pumping down the next creative in sequence. And here I'm not just looking at a car on here. This time I can choose to get involved with the car. I can spin the car around. I can choose the color and see what the color of the car that I want to have a look at. Perhaps I want to have a virtual tour. And let's be honest, we're trying to drive conversions here. So let's start pushing down where your location of your nearest garage is, or being able to drive targeted offers down to you as an individual based on your GPS system. It's continuing the story and closing that conversion cycle down. And then we start moving on, and you move into the next one here, which is this seductive girl, where you're able to sit there and have this being able to hear it actually now start sweeping through and actually buy and order my stuff online. So I can start to carry on and actually buy the flowers in real time whilst watching the television ad for Teleflora. And then so as we start to move out beyond that, and then suddenly there becomes a game where the next advert here, to simulate this one, is what we want to do in terms of creating a game. So in this particular case, I can choose to get involved, and this time I'm trying to actually play and give the characters some sort of beer. Just as the dog's running around on television, is how you're choosing to sort of give the beer to the person here. And so what you're doing is playing along with the television commercial in a very interactive way. And then it's saying, sorry, unlucky that time, play again. Or if I'd been successful, it would have unlocked a coupon code and a beer case would have arrived to me. And then you sort of close that one down, and straight away, I'm back into the game. And so what we're doing is this is being rolled out currently. We're launching it in Vegas as we speak and here. This is actually happening, and we're able to start working with partners to genuinely deliver out this content into television advertising. For us, it's understanding that point of engagement, understanding that interaction, transaction, and bringing them ever closer together, and start to understand the true consumer attribution and touch points that we can measure of how television is did I see the ad and did I drive a sale? Not guesswork of did they click and how many dedupes, and all that. Genuinely trying to get closer to that final ultimate answer and delivering points to TV advertisers in the way they want to understand them. It's driving the creative, driving the interaction. Once we've locked onto you, how do we retarget you? And then how do we retarget you with dynamic creative on television and ultimately drive that purchase? And notice in our new world, there are no laptops. So really it's about rethinking how does engagement work? How does online activity work? To us, we call it engagement everywhere. It's not about video everywhere, it's about consumer engagement, driving those conversions, but in this new ecosystem, in this very new world. Taking the old legacy TV systems, overlaying them with data, taking companies, what we've seen in terms of this marriage of online, of these rich media guys who've reinvented online advertising and rolling them together into a platform, and then rolling them together with TV advertising into a single platform, and being able to roll this stuff out. That's the vision of what we're doing. It starts now in being able to deliver this dual screen creatives, and we start moving from here in terms of how we move things forward. But thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate that.